Hope is here. The way to break free with your host, Angela Pedigo, will light a flame within you. Host Angela Pedigo is an author, speaker, and certified life recovery, grief, and joy restoration coach. Angela uses her own life experiences to help you navigate and guide you to success. She also has developed tools that incorporate her faith and her drive to overcome any obstacle in life. So please welcome the host of The Way to Break Free, Angela Pedigo.
Welcome, everybody, to The Way to Break Free. I'm your host, Angie Pedigo. I'm so glad you could join today. I'm here with my special guest, Sebrina Westjohn. Some of you may have watched another show of ours where Colby Lane was on there, and this is his mom. So we're going to just dive in with Sebrina today. She and I have a lot in common, and we have a lot of the same passion for people who seem to try to find their identity in relationships rather than just really knowing who they are. And Sebrina has got so much that she can share, just wisdom and knowledge about those kind of situations just from her own experiences. So we're going to jump right in. Sabrina, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Angie.
I'm so glad you could join us and just be willing to come on here and share kind of life's lessons, things that you've learned. And Sabrina's been in corporate America, but 35 plus years, so you've done a lot of different kinds of jobs there, different industries, and banking to the funeral home sales and, all kinds of stuff. So I'm just looking forward to just getting to dive in today because I want to know more about your stories and your experiences as well. So welcome, and we'll just jump in. When did you first realize that relationships were kind of difficult for you?
From high school.
Okay, that's good.
In high school, I was, I don't know how to explain it because, after you get older and you start studying and thinking, and, my parents were married, had a great mother and father, but my father was always traveling and gone. And then, when my father was around, he was like a man's man, so he was always with the guys. And my father loved to play golf, and I always was like, I'm going to go play golf with my daddy, but no, that's a man's sport. And so I don't know, but I really think little girls, that's their first relationship.
Yes.
Yes. And
so interesting you say that. I worked for an attorney one time who had two daughters. They were very close in age, but they thought their daddy hung the moon in high school. And that was foreign to me. They wanted to be with him all the time and their parents. And I asked him one day, I was like, you've done a fantastic job raising these girls. What was the secret? And he said, I always wanted to be enough for them so they didn't have to go find it in somebody else.
And that's good. That's really good. My father didn't have a father growing up. And he was a good daddy. He wasn't perfect. But, never said I love you. If he got us birthday cards, he would say love you. You know? But he just wasn't affectionate. And so, of course, when I got older, Angie, and moved to Texas, and I would come home and I'd run in and sit down in his lap, and he's like, what's going on? What are you doing? And then I'd get up and I'd say, love you, Daddy. And I'd get about to the doorway and I'd say, love you too. And then he'd always laugh, So as a little girl, or as a teenager, and my high school years was when he was gone the most, and so I think you feel like there's something missing, and my mother's very loving, had a very loving mother, but it's like looking back, I think you just want to be loved,
Yes.
And,
did you ever see much affection between your parents? If she's really loving and he's not, what was your view of what does the relationship look like?
Now, they never fussed. But no, they, like they didn't hold hands, they didn't kiss, My mother was very strict. My father let her raise us, basically, we were taken to church every Sunday. But, when I think about my first relationship, I just, I just, you were always searching for that, and she wouldn't let me date.
So what was your age? What was the age you had to be when you got to start dating?
It was supposed to be 16, but I think at 15 she let me go a couple of times with other couples.
Yeah.
I think at one time it was me and two of my friends and like three guys and we were all in one vehicle. Of course, that was back in the 80s, so the cars were bigger and four of us were in the back seat and two were in the front seat, so but it was 16.
It's funny to reminisce, kind of to go back to that, because that was like the standard rule for every household, it seemed like, and now that's just a lost thing. You don't ever hear anybody say those things anymore. Like there's no limitations.
Yeah. And one of my first relationships in high school, they were non-committal, and I was crazy about them, and I think that it's like I chose to want to be there, and I knew they cared for me, but they were non-committal, and so therefore I felt like from day one I could never say anything because it was my choice to be in that relationship. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I think from there that formed my future, and my future relationships. And this person he never lied. That was one thing. He was very honest, was not a manipulator, so at that point I didn't know what that looked like because all I'd ever known was honesty, but then started college, and like I said, I had to be home my senior prom at 10:30, so I was like, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So all my friends are out, and I'm like, I gotta be home.
That's so funny you say that. I can remember my sophomore year's first prom I went to. My time to be home was 10:30.
And so then when I graduated, I'm like, I'm not coming home. I'm staying out all night. I'm not coming home. So, and then from there, I moved to Nashville. Like literally graduated on Friday, moved to Nashville on Sunday afternoon.
High school or college?
High school.
High school. Graduated high school, packed up, moved to Nashville.
We moved to Antioch. Me and two more girlfriends, and we worked at Opryland. And I worked actually at the mall, the Hickory Hollow Mall, which doesn't exist now. I worked at Sears from 9 to 2. I'd ride the bus to Opryland and work at Opryland from 3 to 11.
Wow.
So, and honestly, it was a great summer. But started college in August at Ball State and met my first husband. And he was a sweetheart and he was honest, but he was ready to get married. And
did you meet him at college?
I met him at Rivergate Mall.
Oh.
I worked at the mall after school. So I met him at the mall.
There you go.
And so he was ready to get married. Wanted to get married. And
how long had you guys been together at that point?
A month.
Oh, wow.
I met him November 15th, so he asked me Christmas.
Wow.
About 45 days. And I was like, let's just wait another year. So then I thought he would forget about it. And then in February, he gave me a ring. And he's like, nope, I'm ready. Let's go. And I'm like, okay, well, let's plan for December. And he's like, no, let's go ahead and get married. And he wanted me to be able to be with him more. And I lived at home, and I still had rules that I had to follow. And it didn't matter that I was in college. And so...
so had you moved back home from Antioch then?
Yeah.
Back home to go to college?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
And
so how old were you then?
I turned 18 in August of 86.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm telling my age. Not that the gray hair doesn't tell my age, but so I was 18.
Okay.
And we got married in April of 87, and I had Kobe in January of 88.
Wow.
So
you had to grow up fast.
Yeah.
married, child, college, working at 19.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I quit school and went to work full time at a finance company, and then from there to the mortgage business. Mm-hmm. So,
do you ever regret quitting college
yes,
at that time?
Yes, absolutely. I used to always say, live your life with no regrets. But if I could say that I have one regret, it's probably not having my degree, because I have started college so many times and took courses and, but never finished. Mm-hmm. So that's probably the one thing I do regret. But, Kevin passed away, and when Kobe was 3. Mm-hmm. And I was offered a job in Dallas, Texas, mm-hmm. in corporate.
Nice.
And I went out there and met my second husband. And he was 20 years older.
Now, was that a big transition, the move itself? From Tennessee to Texas.
I put my 3-year-old son in the front seat of a U-Haul. My family helped me pack the U-Haul. And me and Kobe drove to Texas. And the U-Haul broke down in Arkansas. And that was before cell phones. And so I'm sitting there just crying. But I'm trying not to get Kobe upset. And pulled into a parking lot where there was a payphone, because they had payphones back then. And I'm calling, going, the truck broke down. And, and they're like, okay, you got to call U-Haul. And they come out and fixed everything. And we made it to Texas. And got an apartment, and yes, it was an eye-opener coming from a small town.
Cultural shock, perhaps, probably.
And when I flew out there for the first time, I'd never flown before.
Oh.
So, yes, that was.
So how old were you then when you made the move?
22.
Wow.
22.
Yeah.
Yeah, right before my 23rd birthday. Mm-hmm.
So what'd you think?
Well, I was a Dallas Cowboy fan, so I was like, "Oh yeah,
all right."
It was, like my mother made all my clothes, all my dress clothes. My mother, my grandmother. Mm-hmm. So I'm in Dallas in corporate America, and I see all these girls with all these, as my mother used to say, ready-made clothes, and I'd be like, "Oh wow, that's so pretty! Oh wow." Because I didn't know how to match clothes and do all that kind of stuff. And so Mama would always be like, I made this dress, so I just wear it. Or I made this suit, I just wear it, and you're wearing this shirt with it. So there was this one black lady that used to come in my department, and I was the manager, and she always dressed so nice, and I'd be staring at her. So one day she's like, "Girl, what are you looking at?" And I'm like, "I'm just looking at how beautiful you are and how beautiful your clothes are." Oh, well, thank you, because she was going to have an attitude.
She would be a good shopping buddy.
Yeah, so, but that's where I met my second husband. And again, he was 20 years older, and I thought, oh, I'll never have to worry about anything. But
no, so not having to worry about anything because he was older, you thought? Like
I thought I won't have to worry about him ever cheating. I won't have to worry about, him going to bars, because I was 23, he was 43. I'm like, so he's mature,
He's got it all out of his system.
Right. He's a VP. Now, he was the senior VP, he already had a career, all of those things that you think
appeared to be stable.
Want in a husband.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I didn't take into consideration was God. Mm-hmm. I love God. I pray to God. But, I never was like, okay, God, I need you to find me a loving, someone that loves you as much as I do, where we can have God in our home, and I never prayed for God to show me, bring that one to me, and
was it easy for you to attach to somebody in a relationship? Like, did you fall in love quickly?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which
because you're searching.
Yes, for love.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like I'm sure with Steve there was infatuation, because, he's senior vice president of this corporation in Dallas, Texas, and I associated Dallas with the TV show Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
If you remember that show.
Yes, I can remember as a little girl. It was always on at my house.
And when I was watching it, I used to always say, I'm going to live in Dallas one day and I'm going to work in one of those high rises. And I did. I mean, I worked downtown Dallas for Nations Bank.
Wow.
But back to relationships. So that Steve and I dated for 3 years. We were married for 16. And, that was like the important years of my life. I feel like, like from 23 to 43, 44,
Yeah, that's a big chunk of your life.
And I was so naive, and so I found out while we were dating that he was cheating on me, but I thought, well, let me back up. I had went to Dallas and took a job, but then I had come back to Tennessee because I was homesick. And
how long had you been in Dallas before you came back?
So I went in January. They offered me the job. Moved out there in March and moved back here in May. End of May, 1st of June. It was Memorial Week.
So early on.
Yes. Kinda. I didn't last very long. And I was very attached to my mother. And that was before cell phones. And I can remember my telephone bill was always more expensive than my rent.
You had to pay long distance. Long distance calls. That's so funny. Let's pause right there and we'll take a quick break. I want to pick up from that story right there where you come back to Tennessee. So we'll hear a word from our sponsors and be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back from the break. We are on this journey today with Sebrina Westjohn. She is sharing some lessons that she's learned throughout her relationships and things. And so, Sebrina, we'd moved to Dallas, right? Like for several few months, came back home to Tennessee. Let's pick up from there.
Okay. So I got homesick, back home to Tennessee, and I guess we went back. I was home for probably about 9 months, but the guy that after I came back, let me back up. I didn't start dating him out there that time. Like
the first trip.
Right. So came back and was in an on again, off again relationship with my first husband. And he passed away in November of that year. So then I would say in March maybe of the following year, started a relationship with Steve. And so I would go to Dallas, fly out and work in the corp because he worked at the same company. So I would fly out to Dallas and work and, and we'd go out and then I'd come back home and people would tell me, he was, dating this one or with that one or something. I'd be like, oh, well, that's because, I'm here. But then he asked me to marry him. I'm like, but if I moved there, he wouldn't do that. That's just because we're having a long distance relationship. Let me just say to all the young ladies listening, if you're in a relationship with someone who is cheating on you, it does not change when you get married. And marrying is a naive thought to think that they'll change because they're not going to change.
How old were you when you had to debate that?
Well, so I started dating I guess I was 24 when I started dating, between 23 and 24 somewhere. So
the reason I ask those questions a lot, like gauging age and stuff, is because, I think we think early on, especially in those early 20s, right out of high school, early 20s, mid 20s, that we think we've got it all figured out. And,
absolutely.
In our generation, people were starting their lives much earlier than I think they do now. Like the generation now wants to live life first. And you see people waiting until their 30s, sometimes their mid 30s to get married, start families. And, they're more prepared mentally, emotionally. They've, been able to experience some life and mature into those things to make the better choices and decisions. But yeah, I think age has a lot to do with it sometimes.
And I felt like I was a mature 23-year-old, because of all the things I had already been through.
Yeah, because you'd already done a lot.
But I also, I got married. When I look back, I think I got married the first time. I'm not saying I didn't love Kevin, but I wanted to get out of the house because my mother was strict, and so I think that was part of that, and then when Steve come along, like I said, my first husband didn't lie and didn't cheat, so that was a whole new thing for me that I'd never been exposed to, and I remember that one of the first things that I caught him in a lie about was I had taken vacation and had went there, me and Colby, and his phone rang at his apartment, and I answered it, and the lady said, "I'm his wife," and I'm saying, "You're his wife?" I said, "He told me he wasn't married." Well, he lied, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" So now here I am, like, is he married? Is he not married? And so I hang up the phone with her and I call him at work and I said, "A lady's just called here and said she's your wife. I'm not married. Don't listen to her. She's crazy." I'm like, okay. So I hang up the phone, and I am such a trusting person. And so never ever wanted to prowl or anything. But the first thing I do is I go to his dresser and I pull out some drawers. Well, I find paperwork, and he was legally separated, but he was still married, So that was probably the first big lie I caught him in. And so I said, "Come on, Kobe, we're leaving. I'm not going to be in a relationship with someone like this, And I didn't tell Kobe what was going on. He was little, but we get in the car and we leave. And so, then he's calling and he's like, he said, because I did know this. He lived in North Carolina and our company hired him and he had to move to Dallas. So in the state of North Carolina, you have to be legally separated for a year before you can get a divorce. And he's like, my year's almost up. In my mind, I'm divorced. And I'm like, but a lie's a lie. I asked you if you were married and you said, no, I'm divorced. So and then that just went on, and for the next 16 years, and I think back, and it was like there's still that wanting to be loved, hoping you can change them, and
wanting to be enough.
Yes,
wanting to be enough for them to change.
And then, like I said, he did ask me to marry him, and I was like, well, he'll change, and I think once you marry, I think that's just I got her, so I can do whatever I want now. She's not going anywhere.
Something just came to me about that. So, like, people a lot of times, I think, get into relationships and they want to. There's so much codependence in the world.
Absolutely.
It's so sad to me. We were talking about this on another show. It might have been last week that allegedly 90% of Americans are codependent, which tells me that we do a terrible job of how we treat one another, because codependence comes on from fear of abandonment, fear of, not being enough. And when you're searching for that love or that validation, sometimes I think that's why we jump into rescuer modes, because it's not about necessarily wanting to save the person so much as it is, if I succeed at rescuing this person, then it must mean I was worthy enough for them to change.
Right.
It's almost like an added layer of validation to an extent.
I used to laugh because we were literally in counseling the first week of our marriage, because I had found out that the week before our marriage, he was out with another woman.
Gotcha.
So, and I used to joke about that, and that counseling session didn't go good. That counselor, because I go in and he's like trying to say that I'm the way I was because of the way I was raised. And I'm like, I didn't do anything wrong here. I'm like, he's done this, and this is why we're here, and you're attacking me and my upbringing. So I didn't go to him. And, throughout the marriage, I went to counseling a few times. And I think finally what struck a chord with me, Angie, was the last person I went to. She was a Christian counselor, and I had been praying and praying ever since Steve and I got married for him to be saved, because I had taken him to church with me, and he didn't believe like that. And he's like, "Oh, that's a cult," and I'm like, "It's not a cult, And
you may have to speak up just a little bit. I think the microphone's
okay. And so I said, "It's not a cult," And so when I went to her, and this was towards the end, and I said, I just think if the Lord, if he could get saved, he'll change and everything will be fine. And she said, I'm a Christian counselor. She said, I see deacons, preachers, priests, elders. And she said, I just don't want you to build your hopes up thinking that's like the magic button and he's going to switch like that. She said, because that's the beginning. And she said, but I need to ask you a question. And I said, okay. And she said, do you love yourself? And nobody had ever said that to me before. And so I just got real quiet, and I said, are we supposed to love ourselves?
Oh, that's good.
Because I'm like, I saw at my grandmother's house, the men ate first, and then the women, then the kids, My mother always fixed my father's plate, my mother ironed my father's clothes, my mother put us first, so I had watched my mother always put everybody before her, And so even though Steve was cheating and lying and doing the things he did, I still fulfilled I worked a full-time job and still fulfilled my role as a wife and mother, and I still ironed his clothes and I still cooked and you know what I'm saying? So
I want to ask you a question about that. So coming from a Christian background as well, we're taught to be humble, but the definition of humbleness has been largely skewed. We actually, Colby and I had this conversation several years ago, like when we kind of were studying about some of that. But do you think part of that, like, oh, we're supposed to be humble, we're not supposed to think anything of ourselves, because that's the
Yes.
definition of that. When actually,
and women are to be seen and not heard.
yeah, humble actually is supposed to mean to fully occupy the space that you're in, like not to under occupy. So let's say you're in a room, and in this room, you're supposed to occupy this space, like, with your gifts or your talents, you're supposed to occupy the space. The definition of humbleness has gotten to where, oh, let's go hide in the corner and let's not let ourselves be, don't do anything. That's being humble, when that's not it at all, because you're not stepping into like what we need to be, and like how we're supposed to take care of one another and take care of ourselves. How can you take care of other people even if you can't fully occupy the space you're put in because you're told to go sit in a corner, also not to over occupy the space you're in, because then that's prideful. There's ego talking, that sort of thing. It's to just be willing to occupy the space you're in. That's humble, because that's being willing to do what you're called to do, what you're supposed to do, not overdo and not underdo, but do the job you're called to do. And that where that humbleness is said, go get in the corner, shove in the corner, I think we take more, like our kindness is mistaken for weakness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Just like when I read your book and you talk about how your dad was and how your mom was just the sweetest and kindest, and you didn't know how she put up with some of the things she put up with. And that's how I saw my mom, like my dad stayed gone like a month at a time, and my mom never abandoned us. My mom never went out drinking. My mom never did drugs. She centered on us, and it was, oh, he's not home, and I can't get out of bed today. I mean, there was no, I'm not saying she wasn't depressed. I don't think she was depressed. You know what I'm saying? It was just a totally different generation.
Yeah, it's just generational stuff.
And so, but when she asked me if I love myself, I had to go, hold up, and let me back up a little bit to say, before Steve, I was raised in church and I went to Sunday school, but I didn't study my Bible. You know what I mean?
Like, that's good. Yes.
I didn't study. And so Steve was raised Catholic. And so, every time something would come up, he would say, oh, well, that's a Baptist thing.
We could go on a lot about this. Let's pause right here. We're going to take a quick break because I don't want to interrupt you when we get to talk about this. We'll be back in just a moment.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
We're back from the break. Sebrina, you had just gotten asked a loaded question by your counselor. Do you love yourself? So this sent you on a search. Tell us about the search.
Well, actually, that was later in the marriage, but Steve and I had been married probably 4 years, and he was raised Catholic, I was raised Baptist, and I would say something, he'd say, well, that's a Baptist thing. And I would say, okay. So one day I went and got my Bible, and I said, can we agree that we both believe in the Bible? And he said, yes. And I said, well, I'm going to read and study my Bible, and from here on out, it'll be a Bible thing.
Oh, good answer.
So he said, okay. So that's when I really dug in and started reading and studying the Bible. And then later in the marriage is when I went to that counselor, and she said, this was after years of abuse. And she said, and here's another thing, I didn't even call it abuse. You know what I mean? Because I never heard that word, So that's when she asked me if I loved myself. And then, I was probably 36 or 7 by this point. So then I'm looking backwards, right? And I'm like we said, I saw how my mom was, my grandmother, go to church. Women can't speak in church in the missionary Baptist belief. And, so I started digging then within myself, and started reading. And then I'm like, well, how can you love someone else if you don't love yourself?
Right.
And, I love my boys. By this time I had another child. So I had Kobe and Colin, 2 boys. And, as a mother, you want to protect them. And so then I'm like, well, everything I do for them, and it's like, okay, but again, ask yourself, do you love yourself? So that one was a hard one for me. And I, again, just life continued to change. Steve's company was bought out. We moved back to Lafayette after being in Dallas for almost 20 years. So
was that hard coming back after being there for so long?
I did not want to come back. I did not want to come back. I was so homesick in the beginning, but then I grew to love it, and I got friends, and I had a career, and and then I didn't want to leave, and he didn't want to stay. So, and he didn't want to go back to New York. He was from New York. So, and that's another thing, because then I started saying, how did Steve get this way? And his mother and daddy had never been divorced. They were married. They loved each other, and his brother and his wife had never been divorced. His sister and her husband never divorced, and they weren't like him, and I used to always tell my sister-in-law, I'm like, well, you got the best one, because he just adored her, and and so long story short, and if you've heard Kobe's story, you know this. When Kobe graduated high school, I wanted to go to the Holy Lands. And I got outvoted because Kobe wanted to do a boys' trip with his dad and his stepbrother. And so they went to Puerto Rico, and they caught Steve in bed with another lady. And Kobe never told me. Never told me. And so I started thinking something was going on because I could just see that Kobe had changed towards Steve. But I didn't know, and so that was in 2006. We moved back in 07. I'm sorry. We moved back at the end of 06, in December of 06. And we started building a house in July of 08. And it's like I knew something was going on with Kobe, but it's like I couldn't put my finger on it because he was at this time going to school in Texas. So he had stayed in Texas. And so then finally, that came out, and Steve lied again. And I said, I always said if you hurt our children, I would be done. I said, you've lied to me, I've taken you back. And this is the one time I need you to tell the truth, and you couldn't tell the truth. And, he said, well, I don't know why Kobe's lying. And so I said, well, then I'll call Stephen. And then he's like, no, you're not calling Stephen, which that was his son with his first wife. And so I'm like, okay. And he did his first wife the same way, as a matter of fact, she had called and told me, I know you think I'm the jealous ex-wife, but I'm not. He'll do you the same way. He can't change. I've been in counseling for years. And I was like, oh, great. But I was young and naive. And so I did think, he won't do me that way. And that's why I say to young people, they don't change. They really don't. And another thing I noticed when I got to Texas was growing up in Lafayette, all everybody wanted to do is get married. When I got out there, and I guess it's cultural going from a small town to a large town, but that wasn't going on, and these young girls were confident, and they were going off to college, and, it was just a different, what's the word I'm looking for? Not so much culture, but environment that they grew up in, and, like we had nothing to do here. We rode up and down the Scottsville Road, there they would go to each other's houses, or, they would go to a movie. But like Kobe, I always knew where he was, who he was hanging out with. And most of the time he brought his friends home. That was so different. I didn't want to bring anybody home. I wanted to be gone. And so after we ended up divorcing, I started again doing some soul searching, and I started massage therapy school. And I'll never forget, my first teacher said, this will be a journey. She goes, some of you are married and will end up divorced. She said, some of you will find out who you really are. And I was one of those that was married when school started and was divorced before I graduated. And I just learned so much there, and just
you think you're going to school to learn a trade, but then you learn about yourself.
Yes, and and I always knew I was a spiritual person, but it just took it to another level for me, and I started reflecting backwards. And, my first marriage, did I pray? God, is this the one you have for me? No. My second marriage, same thing, So then I prayed and I was close to the Lord, but I'm talking about the relationship,
Sometimes I think that's a conversation that we leave God out of because we already know the answer, or we're afraid we're not going to like the answer.
And we think, oh, well, we can do this on our own.
Yeah, I got this. It must be from you. I'm not going to ask you if it's from you. It must be from you, God, because we want it to be.
So I'm going to give you a perfect example. So my mother would always say, oh, I know Steve's the one, because I've been praying for the good Lord to send somebody to take care of you and Kobe. So I know he's the one. So after years of all the stuff I was putting up with, I said, Mama, next time you start praying for me and Kobe, let me know, because I might need to put in a few little requests.
Well, sometimes I think
specific requests.
I think any relationship that could be, on the rocks and having struggles and things like that, there is hope they can change, but there again, you have to put the work in. Like sometimes it's going back to childhood things or whatever. Sometimes the childhood things that we experience in our life they're not our fault, but we do as adults have responsibility to heal from those things. It's whether or not we take the responsibility and we do the counseling or do the therapy or, take these things to God, and we have to actually, want to be different than what has been this nature of us to be different. There's a lot of emotional wounds. This is the reason that the Bible tells us don't make decisions, don't act on our feelings and our emotions, because they'll fail you, every time. That we've got to ask God these things, and really tap him in. He knows the conversations we don't hear. He's present in all of them. Mm-hmm. He can see things that we don't see. He knows what's around the corner. And in a nutshell, this kept coming to me as you were talking about cultural differences, and here in a small town, very small, strong Christian community, to a bigger city where it's just different. It's not right or wrong. They're just different. I think it's very important. I try to stress this when we're working with people, like in relationship situations, about being equally yoked.
Amen.
Yes, because if its beliefs are off, there's going to be a battle.
Yes.
If there's cultural differences, there's going to be a battle. Not to say, that's not the person that's for you, right, but you need to learn each other's culture, and you have to respect each other's culture and each other's differences. And when if they expect you to fit in this box, or you think I can go in and fit in their box easy, whatever their lifestyle looks like, that's not always so, because we have roots. We've got something we came from that's grounded. And so I think this is why the Bible tells us to be equally yoked, and not just in one area, but in all areas. This is why God knows who he has for us. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come right back, and we will wrap this up.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
It was almost instant. I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com. or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. So, Sebrina, before the break, we were talking about being equally yoked. How did that play into your relationships?
So when I started studying the Bible, that was one of the things I had come across, and I was like, then I compared that to me and Steve, how we weren't equally yoked, Mm-hmm. And then I started thinking back, to, like you were saying, cultural or upbringing or, even religion, mm-hmm. or, and I look back, and I wasn't equally yoked to either one of my first two. Mm-hmm. I have since remarried, and I know it's the one that the Lord placed for me or picked for me, mm-hmm. and our upbringings were the same. And, it's just like it's so easy. I mean, we've been together now. I've known him my whole life, but we've been together 5.5 years. We've never had a fuss. We've never argued. It's just when the good Lord puts him there, and our families just blended together, and there's no jealousy, and there's just all love.
It's just organic.
It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And so, and it's so important when you go to pick someone that you do think about the equally yoked.
What would you say for young people out there searching for that mate? Like, what all would you tell them?
So this Sebrina would tell you not to be like I was when I was young, because it's like it just felt like anybody that pays you attention, you love them, you fall in love with them. And that's not it. Figure out who you are. Have a relationship with the Lord. Love yourself. When Kobe, my son, got out of jail, and, and this is another thing, that whole love yourself thing. And he put himself first, he works out every day, and I'm like, being like, well, it must be nice. I can't even work out, because I have this, or, but I could, but I don't put myself first, And so I talked to my cousin, and she said, Sebrina, she said, and she kind of same upbringing, went through the same, everything kind of the same. And then she's like, Sebrina, in my studies, she said, that's part of his mental well-being. He has to put himself first. He has to work out. He has to go to meetings. He has to do all these things. And, these people that are in addiction, and it doesn't even matter if it's addiction, because you can be addicted to anything. It doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol. I think something's missing. And I think they're searching for something.
Oh, absolutely. The addiction itself is just the coping mechanism for what the pain is underneath there.
And they don't love themselves.
No. And I want to bring this up from a biblical standpoint. We're as a saved by the grace of Jesus individual, and this is the temple of the Holy Spirit, right? Yes. And it's not about a building. It's about this being a temple, that we can be a vessel to be used for God's work. Well, let's put that in the context of a church building. If you pulled up to your church and the steps were cracking, or the columns were like bowed and they're about to break down, or the roof's leaking, or there's a window busted out, you would immediately jump in to fix that.
Yes.
Like in any way, repair that building.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to, from a self-care standpoint, we're supposed to take care of this. I think it's 1 Corinthians 6:19 through 20. It says, or do you not know that we were bought with a price, and that this is a temple of the Holy Spirit, and that we have from God, and that we were bought with a price, and therefore to glorify God with our body.
Yes.
And that's a care, like a take care, not just a physical, but a mental, emotional, spiritual, because if you leave physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being out, all four of those components make up different facets of this vessel, right? And so whichever one is lacking needs some attention, just like we would give to the building itself.
Kobe had some friends that were Mormon, and, their belief is, no caffeine, no sugar, or light sugar, or, take care. And a lot of them are not overweight, and not that I'm not saying anything about being overweight. I'm overweight. But what I'm saying is that whole taking care of yourself, loving yourself. And Kobe has taught me so much. And as I have watched him, I have seen, because when you love yourself, you're able to love others.
Yes.
You're able to give of yourself. And so these young girls that are graduating high school, I've got a niece that's graduating, or if you're graduating college, or, I'm not here to tell you not to get in a relationship. That's not what this is about. But this is about telling you, if you're in a relationship and you think something's wrong, it probably is wrong. If they hide their phone, if they're not open with you, if they're always leaving you by yourself, then you need to trust your gut instinct, which sometimes I feel like that's the Lord, you know, that instinct we have in us, or and don't keep thinking they're going to change, because they're probably not going to change. And getting married doesn't change. And then if you get married and you're having problems, having a baby doesn't change. Buying a house doesn't change.
All those big moments.
Yes, those issues are there. I hear so many people say, we're having problems, but we're going to have a baby, and I just know that's going to help. No, that's not going to help. That's going to bring an innocent life into a problem that's already there. And I really feel like, like after I learned to be by myself and have that one-on-one relationship with the Lord and could talk to Him, and I waited on Him. You can pray and ask, but if you don't wait for His answer, then it's still not good. So you have to wait. And when you have that relationship, He will let you know, and He'll bring the right person into your life.
Yes, because He knows the plans that He has for you. Sebrina, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. It has been I appreciate you sharing all that. It's been very informative, and we can all take a lot away from that. If you're out there and you're struggling in any of those kind of ways, just seek help. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. Seek help, work through those things that may be the stumbling blocks for you, because there is hope for everybody, and we can always be better today than we were yesterday. We just have to make the effort. So yes, reach out to those around you, counseling, therapy, whatever that looks like for you. And let's just strive to heal so that we can be better versions of ourselves. Thank you for tuning in today to The Way to Break Free on Bold Brave TV. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
This has been The Way to Break Free with your host, Angela Pedigo. The one thing Angela attributes her personal victories to is her relationship with God and her deep faith. Tune in each week and hear stories and testimonies of people in personal and professional trenches and how they overcome them with their own faith in God. The Way to Break Free has something for everyone, everywhere. Right here, Wednesdays, noon Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.